Are we good to go, Jack? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
just tell us why you've chosen the album.
All right. Well, I chose the Downtown Struts. I came across them. They're from California, I think. And I used to work in a bar called 12 Bar in Soho in London, which was a great venue, great rock and roll pub with a lot of history. And I used to work there, and they used to have all sorts of bands coming through. Like Adele played there, like Libertines played there before they were famous. And like when I worked there, I saw Sleaford Mods and loads of other bands, when they were just on the way up. It was really great place to work. And then they used to have a playlist of sort of bands that had passed through. So you'd have like songs on and be like, oh yeah, if someone would buy a CD, they'd put it on the playlist, and then they'd always be playing in the pub. And then I heard the Downtown Struts on there, and it was the song Rogues by them. And I was like, what is this? And then I just wrote it down. I was like, Downtown Struts Rogues. And then my colleague said, oh, they played here last week. I was like, fuck. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got the album. I got it from All Ages Records, I think, in Camden. And I got it, and I just hammered the album over and over again. And this was about 6 or 7 years ago. I just think it's my favorite, maybe one of my favorite punk rock albums ever. I think it's absolutely perfect. I think it's like a bit Americana, like influence. It's like it's rock and roll. It's got the most amazing melodies. And the reason I want to talk about it is because they're a really unknown band, right? And they broke up after the album. They released one more album afterwards, and then they broke up. And then the singer went on to do other stuff. He did a band called Volume, who are really good. And then he does his own stuff now. But this album for Downtown Struts is perfect, in my opinion. What I wanted to talk about is they're not very well known. The album means a lot to me and the other lads in WACO. It reminds me of a few really close friends of mine, us getting drunk, listening to it, summer, winter, whatever, just singing along in various houses I've lived in over the years. And they probably made no money from that album. And they did one UK tour, as far as I can tell, and they played at the pub that I worked at, and I missed them. And I was told it was a really quiet gig as well, which is a shame. And I guess it reminds me that things that exist outside of mainstream success can still have a big impact on people. Because this is an example of a band that most people wouldn't know. Even in the punk scene, people don't really know them that well. But it's such... Like it's like one of my all-time favorites, and I just think it's healthy for me to be reminded that despite, like, there's so many amazing musicians out there, and that not everything hangs on mainstream success, big festival lineups, huge tours. The magic sometimes is within one fucking great album that sticks with whoever's heard it. And I'm like an evangelist when it comes to this album. I tell everyone to listen to it, and they usually like it. And I guess that's what it is, because art is more important than what it can be commodified as, sold as, and the people it reaches, how many people it reaches. I guess it helps me with my band as well a little bit, because we have got some really amazing, loyal fans, and our music means something to them. And it's quite easy for me sometimes to feel a bit like, it's a shame we don't do things that other bands do. But I always go back to, well, Downtown Struts, I think about that band or other bands like that, where you think, well, they didn't do much. They don't even exist anymore. They broke up. And that album's still got a really special place in my heart, and it will for the rest of my life. And that's why I chose it, because beautiful things can happen in the underground, I guess, and outside of the mainstream gaze. That's what I'm getting at.
What did you guys think of it?
So it reminded me a lot of the Menzingers, that kind of like Bruce Springsteen infused like punk rock.
Yeah.
So I quite liked it. I mean, there's bits of like stuff like the Wonder Years, and like there was a Spanish Love Songs album that we covered a couple of years ago. It's sort of a bit like kind of grown up pop punk in a way.
Yeah,
it's very sort of, it's got that sort of emotional angst, but it doesn't sound quite as, it's not like you're a teenager and you've got angst. It's more like you're an adult and you've got angst. So I like that vibe. And strangely, one of there's sort of two vocalists, and one of them has got quite a gravelly voice, and he reminded me of the guy from Millencolin. I don't know if you remember that band.
Yeah, I love them. Great.
And weirdly, it just reminded me of like the sort of Pennybridge Pioneers album that I grew up with. So I really enjoyed his singing voice. And there was just kind of weird other things that I picked out, like on, I think it's the song Postcards. There's like a weird kind of like almost sponge sounding like bounce. In like the song doesn't sound at all like sponge, but there's just something in the bounce in the opening to that. And then there's almost like a sort of My Chemical Romance vibe on Back to New York, mixed with a bit of Peter Gabriel, which is quite weird. So yeah, there's a lot of things that sort of jumped out on this for me. I quite enjoyed it. I think especially the song Tim, which is like the most sort of men singers on there, I think. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I liked it as well. I would kind of agree with Sneds. I kind of felt as if there was almost kind of like tinges of kind of folk, like just in wee elements, just kind of wee flourishes every now and again. And for my money, that kind of juxtaposition between the two vocalists kind of reminded me a wee bit of kind of Dropkick Murphys, which did it for me.
Yeah, man.
Nice. I thought maybe like Billy Bragg sort of comparison, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's a great comparison. It's funny that you mentioned Spanish love songs and Menzingers, etc., because this album is like 10 years old, and it came out the same year as that big Menzingers album, and it predates Spanish love songs because I think their first album came out a year later. So they could have been really big. That's what I mean. They could have been like with the right backing or whatever, or if that flavors. But then again, that On the Impossible Past by Menzinger, which is a great album, came out that same year, 2012. But I think they've gotten bigger. That even when it came out, it was big, but it's grown in popularity over the years. So unfortunately, Downtown Struts never got that. Really, the other album, second one, was really good. It was a bit different, a bit more introspective, and then they just called it a day. But yeah, there's some good comparisons there.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even heard of the Menzingers until after the party came out, which I think was 2017. So it shows that they may have had like a die-hard fan base, but I didn't really become aware of them until much later. So similar to Downtown Struts, maybe they just kind of, might have been a slow burn and they just never quite got there. But what you're saying about, an album from the underground meaning a lot to people, or mean a huge amount to people, and there's so many people don't have a clue that it even exists, is again sort of quite a magical thing.
Yeah, and it's a nice thing to be able to tell people about it,
Yeah.
There's so many bands out there like that. Like I remember Dan and Ackroyd. Remember them from years ago?
Yeah.
Like their album was phenomenal, and I went to see, who was it again? Evan Dando. He was touring, I think it must have been the anniversary of It's a Shame About Ray album in a venue in Glasgow, and I got served by the lead singer of Dan and Ackroyd. Like, got served a pint.
Wow.
I was just like, I think I was with our mutual mate Tom, and I was like, sure I recognise that guy. He was like, do you recognise him for a night out or something? I was like, no, I don't think so. I think he's like the lead singer of this band. And right enough, he went over and spoke to him, and right enough, he's the lead singer from the band. But that album, played the shit out of that album back in the day.
Yeah.
Strange how, just these things happen.
Yeah.
It's not finished. It's finished.